Hi, Henrik. What's up, my co-host?
Well, I haven't slept for 2 nights now, so I'm reaching that famous point where the surrealism slowly starts to slip into your real life. So in other words, I'm in prime mood to do a Flick Lab episode.
Me, myself, and I has been also busy. I went to a school to give a presentation of the first Halloween film from 1978, and that was quite of a blast. So thank you for everyone for listening to me for at least 5-10 minutes, whatever it was. But yeah, and then we have been doing 2 episodes this week, basically because we've been trying different kinds of things in the laboratory. Anyway, I think it's good to get to the point, sometimes a little bit quicker than usual. What is tonight's film? Outer Space from 1999, I would believe.
Ooh, boy, yeah. I'm still trying to figure out what actually is today's film. Like quite literally today's case, because this really is outer space is, well, first and foremost, it is an art piece, and it is an art piece that actually makes you think, is it even a film? Because in many ways it kind of isn't in the traditional sense how you and me usually understand the concept of a thing called movie.
Yeah, what we can probably agree on is that it's a short film that lasts for 10 minutes, and it's a film. And we are now lately doing a little bit more of the short films, at least once a month. This is something that I chose when I was browsing movie.com. We have already watched The Staggering Girl as one of the films from a movies collection. This is kind of like a Netflix for more artsy-dartsy films where we like to dabble every once in a while. It's a film directed by Peter Tscherkassky, born in 1958. He's an Austrian avant-garde film director, at least mostly, who usually works in found footage. And he doesn't use digital film at all. He basically attended a film school in Vienna and later also studied journalism and political science. And supposedly, what made him an avant garde director began when he was influenced by the January 1978 lectures. He attended these avant garde lectures of P. Adams Sidney at the Australian Film Museum. And he's been still at it since 1979. Been doing a steady release of different kinds of films in this vein, at least I understand him for the most part during his career.
Yeah, of course. When it comes to his title as the director, it
Yeah,
it it merits to be pointed out to anyone who doesn't know the director, and perhaps also as a discussion point for both of us, that Tscherkassky isn't director in a traditional sense. Like usually when you hear the word director, someone is a director. What you think about most likely is something like Steven Spielberg, Alfred Hitchcock, all those Marvel directors, people who are in control of an enormous filmmaking machine with actors, with light technicians, with cameramen. They work on sets, they shoot on locations, stuff like that. That's what the first image that at least I have in my mind when I hear the title director. And Cherkasky is an interesting person in the sense that he's a director who doesn't really direct anything. Tscherkassky's films essentially they are standalone projects, like projects he has done alone by using the film material, using film reels from other movies. He essentially takes the footage to a dark room where he cuts it into different ways and manipulates the footage, like physically manipulates it in a way that it loses more or less its original meaning and intent, and it becomes a new work.
This is just somehow reminding me of the when the sampling age started via the internet and people were illegally downloading a bunch of music and then making their own interpreted uh, tracks by combining those beats or elements from said songs and then basically making it a kind of a challenging case for the copyright law. I don't know what's going on here, of course, but yeah, just came into my mind. What is the film that actually has been, well, manipulated this time?
Today's film, or today's, I don't know what to call it, the unfortunate victim of manipulation. Depends on how you feel about the movie itself, but essentially it's an old poltergeist horror classic called Entity, directed by Sidney J. Fury, which is heavily sexual account of what allegedly is a real life poltergeist case.
Yeah, I just watched the film for the background research for this tonight's episode, and that the entity that this film is based on, this is originally optioned for Roman Polanski actually, but as you stated out, that it's directed by Sidney J. Fury, and he's a director that I have managed to find out was he's a director who is known for working across genres and being able to put his kind of own stamp on them. You could even say that he's a very talented director who took genres known for garbage and then gave the genre a momentary facelift or did something else with the genre. Would you agree with that? I'm not very familiar with the director because I've seen only this one.
Well, I unfortunately have to also confess that I'm not super familiar with Fury. My biggest, the one that I remember the best and I'm most familiar with is also
The Ipcress file.
the Entity.
Oh,
And when it comes to his other works, I really am not super familiar with. I do know a couple of cases from here and there, and unfortunately, with those films, I kinda fail to see like on what premise would all that fame and his legacy as a director would have been built. Like we are essentially my problem here is that we are talking about the director who made Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, which quite agreeably is one of the worst, if not the worst, Superman film ever made. And later on, he has made some really cheap C grade action flicks. Like the one I sat through once was the Dolph Lundgren vehicle detention, which I'm taking is so subpar movie that it even hasn't garnered any kind of a like larger release. I originally saw it as a scan box DVD of all goddamn things. So when it comes to Fury as someone who elevates genre outside of the entity, I haven't seen any examples.
yeah, well, I think his most famous work is the Ipcress file, which I also unfortunately haven't seen, starring Michael Caine, and it's been loaded as a fantastic film and whatnot. But also a lot of praise is receiving the entity. And I do have to admit that at times the film is fucking scary, even though the director himself doesn't see it as a horror film. He sees it as what was it? A supernatural suspense film. Well, anyway, I would call it really horror. And I really like how it begins because you truly cannot comprehend what is going on in this film. Like, without any warning or explanation, you see things that just start happening inside the house. And then later you start to see that there is some kind of otherworldly figure there. You can't see it, it's not visible to the eye, causing intentional harm to the family living in their house. So it's something that I haven't really exactly seen before. That the way that it starts is, my God, like, what is going on here? You can't understand, comprehend any of it. And, it's just starting to slowly open up to you. And it certainly does that too slowly. And it's way overlong film, in my opinion. But very interesting, very interesting. And the way that some of those scenes develop, I would say, are helped by the fact that this is based on real events, or at least it's based on the book, and the book is based on the real events, or air quotation mark real events. Whatever happened there, who knows? But my point is that some of those scenes and how the film develops seems quite realistic or naturalistic. Like it's not like a Hollywood blockbuster where you know everything follows the other thing, but it's you can't really expect what's going to happen next. I kind of like that.
Yeah, it sticks. It sticks its feet pretty strongly to the ground. If I remember correctly, it's been some time since I last saw the film myself, but I do remember that the ending, the final high point of the film went kind of over the rails. If I remember correctly, this is the one where they try to kind of a trap slash study the entity
Yeah,
in some kind of a closed.
yeah. It's a replica of the real house in some kind of facility.
Yeah, yeah, they rebuilt it in some type of a research facility, and if I remember correctly, they were like exploding oxygen cans or something like that.
Yeah, it's liquid helium, and they're trying to kill the monster of the day with that, or capture it. And then the monster of the day. Well, you maybe watch the film. I'm not gonna give all the details.
Yeah, and with that, like with those exploding cans and what happens, the havoc that happens on the last minutes of the film, those I remember having a slight problem with because the rest of the movie is actually it's very much a void of these type of things and this type of extravaganza, and it's very heavily it's kind of a very subdued film up until that point,
Yeah,
and it's a movie that actually benefits from the fact that it doesn't try to be anything big and bombastic because the main theme of the movie is extremely hard and haunting. Essentially, what we are talking about in the entity is rape. The
yeah. It
film is based on the Doris Pither case, where Doris Pither has made the statement that during 1974 she allegedly was being raped by a ghost or more than one separate entities, ghosts, poltergeists, you name it. But essentially, the whole haunting is revolving around sexual violence and rape.
Yeah, but of course it pays to remember that this is a film, and these are usually made for more. These are made more entertaining on film than it probably ever was in real life. Not, of course, saying that rape is entertaining. I'm simply saying that when it comes to those exploding helium tanks and whatnot, take it with truckloads of salt, of course.
Yeah, that's something where you kind of really have to question the film. How much is this based on real events? But of course, I do understand. It's a film. It has to work like a film. It needs to have a climax. It
Uh,
needs to have some type of ending. I get it, but I still overall I did feel that the stuff preceding that ending was kind of a more stronger because it was so held back, and there really weren't that much anything before the ending. And in my opinion, it kind of did suit very well the overall theme, sexual assault.
yeah, this is kind of a funny episode. I see that we're almost starting to analyze the entity itself and not the film that we have today. But
Yeah, yeah, sorry, this was the entity review in disguise.
yeah, yeah, so it's kind of hard to talk about this film, to say the least. The outer space, I mean, but we can try that. If somebody would actually study as their life's work or something, the film theory or film itself, or would be able to kind of overanalyze uh, in that way the camera angles or what is actually happening. I think that would be interesting. But as we are just two dumbos here, I think it's just better to no, but it's better to stick with the how we feel when watching this film and what kind of thoughts arise. Quite simple as that, on the basis of what you see. And when it comes to this film, technically it's apparently, quote, uses forensic editing and reprocessing techniques to stretch and cut deeply into the surface of film, revealing layers of unsettling emotions repressed inside their stories. End quote. This is coming from a website called art.base.co, which had like a synopsis of this film. It's called Avant Garde, as stated. When it comes to casting, we have Barbara Hershey from The Entity, of course, known for, what should I say, Falling Down, 1993, Insidious, the horror film from 2010, and perhaps 1114 from 2003. And since we are discussing this material, we could say that the house exterior that we see in the film is filmed in El Segundo in California, whereas the house itself, not surprising to anyone who is set in LA. But yeah, to get to the point, how do you feel when you're watching this film?
Mm, for me, it's an interesting question because essentially what outer space is. I don't know if it's part of, but it's very reminiscent of, is the British scratch video movement, which was a British video art culture or movement that emerged in the early or mid 1980s. And essentially what scratch video was all about is precisely the same type of deal as outer space. It's using found footage, fast cutting, and very multi-layer style to somehow significantly change or alter the original source material and give it a new meaning or enhance the meaning that the material originally had. A lot of the scratch video movement was centering around political ideals and, well, political art radicalism. Like, for example, Margaret Thatcher was something that quite often found herself as a target of the scratch video artists. So therefore, when it comes to the visual presentation of the film, it's not something that is completely new to me. So there is not the, for me there was not this I've never seen anything like this before. Completely new frontier
Mm.
element. But of course, that does not still mean that the film itself wouldn't have a strong emotional reaction to me. And what I found Outer Space to be was, in the end, extremely hard to watch. Both extremely literally, in very physical sense,
Epilepsy inducing.
because this is most definitely a film that I would recommend to anyone who is epileptic or has a tendency for migraines.
Yeah, would not. So, serious warning for epileptic people to just do not watch this film, please.
Yeah, yeah. Skip immediately. It has extremely like the simply the editing itself is something that very well might ignite a seizure, and to add to that, it also has extremely heavy and strong strobe effect.
Yeah, let me have a little story time here. The first time that I saw this film was actually when I was on my way to work because I was really tired of having these 1 hour trips to work. It would be 1 hour to one direction, and I just wanted to have something to do, for God's sakes. At least here I could have some time to watch films, short films from movie, and then I thought, okay, let's see what is this outer space nonsense, and just roll it without reading anything. And that was really interesting. Of course, I was in a very lit metro, so I didn't get that like strobe effect so strongly. But my God, when I was now in the flat here in the living room, and I thought it was a fucking great idea to put all the lights off and just kind of enjoy and get into the mood. Like I was like, oh, okay, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's surprising because the film doesn't give you any warning.
yeah,
Like one would think that Tscherkassky would have the common decency to put a warning text before the film.
yeah.
Like I use a shit ton of strobe. If you have a tendency for epileptic seizures or migraine, just skip the movie. But nothing, no warning at all. And when the strobe finally starts, it doesn't come exactly out of the bushes. The film does this has this kind of a flickering effect going on right from the get go, but you are not suited into when the strobe effect starts to be on its strongest. Like all of a sudden, it just flashing starts to happen, or that white light flashing starts.
Yeah, let's go through kind of the structure, if any, of this film. Like, basically, it starts with, well, basically, you could see it as some kind of a, well, found footage film that has just been badly stored somewhere, and it would kind of almost start looking like a normal film when you start to get into it and you have this external shot of the house. But then it gets deteriorated the film quality and the what happens to the film physically that you can see. It happens really quickly, and there's the woman who enters the house. By the way, this film is now in black and white. The original film is in color, so this is in black and white. And she enters the building. I think we see the two daughters of her there really quickly, but then it gets into this really nightmarish vibe where she looks into this corridor, and I believe she's sees two rooms, and then it seems like the flickering just keeps on going, but the actual frames are not changing to anything. It just gets jammed there, which is really really eerie. And afterwards, of course, we get to this the attacks of the entity of what happens to the house. For me, this was really disturbing as well because I didn't know the entity beforehand, and I just watched this material and what is happening to this lady, and you can't even figure it out because you're watching this deteriorated film. You can't see anyone. She's screaming. What I think it seems like is that the house is falling apart or something. There's an earthquake or some kind of otherworldly force, or she's going nuts by herself, some kind of a seizure, or what's happening here. everything is completely out of control. And then it goes on and on and on, and the film deteriorates even further. And then you see the perforation holes of the film, and it's starting to do this strobe light shit. And then it follows with some calm moment, insofar as the lady is calm, but the film is still mostly going crazy. And then there is some more chaos, and there's the shot where she kind of almost like is stabbing the audience with something, and then the final shot, I believe, is the exterior of the building once again, and then it just flickers into oblivion, and that's it.
Yeah, to keep it in with the original source material here, the entity. Tscherkassky's Outer Space pretty much deals with the entity's subject matter. Or at least that's my reading. Outer Space deals with sexual abuse, and more specifically with violent rape. And kind of my reading of the film was that it aims to be an visual, especially visual simulation of rape, and it tries to take the simulation as far as also kind of to transcend into the viewer's space, so to say. To me, the like it's really hard to put in words, but
And
but
yeah, just it feels, I when I was watching this, especially because I didn't have the background of having watched The Entity, I didn't get the rape idea of the material at all. But now that you mention it, yeah, this is one way to go.
yeah, and kind of like this sounds stupid as all hell. But I would almost maintain that the film actually tries sexually assault its audience. Like and my rationality here is that that rape is something that happens kind of in two realms to its victim. There is the physical realm of sexual assault, which is basically everything that happens, and then there is the emotional side of sexual assault, which is crossing the individual borders and crossing the rights that individuals hold sacred and self-explanatory. Like you and I, we have the right to control and be in command of our bodies, as long as we don't use our bodies to harm others. That's that's an essential right to every human being, pretty much. And in rape and in sexual assault, the one doing the assault breaks those boundaries. There's kind of there's this unwritten and unworded out rule that you are not supposed to touch my body without my permission.
Mm.
And during a sexual assault, that rule is being discarded extremely strongly and violently, which is something that I believe you can actually found in the later statements and testimonies of those who have gone through an sexual assault. In statements like, it made me feel worthless and I felt violated, because there is a there is something kind of a bigger concept, like my right to be untouched, that has been broken against.
Mm.
And this of course, I must emphasize, is 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 really extremely kind of a lame ass comparison, but I kind of believe that the film aims to do this. As film critics, we also have a set of rules that we kind of take for granted. One of these is the whole concept of the death of the author, and the right for film critics to read into film what they want. Like you take Grave of the Fireflies for example.
Mm.
You can watch Grave of the Fireflies and think that, oh my god, like Roger Ebert said, this is one of the best anti-war movies ever done.
No, I don't know about that really.
And neither would the director of the film, who has gone on the record to state that the film does not have an anti-war message at all. But we film critics, those who write to the papers, the Roger Eberts, and us, you and me, two podcasters, we take it for granted that, of course, we autonomously we do have the right to read what we want into the source material. That's essentially the Flick Lab's whole game. We provide the analysis of any given film that we approach to, like we are doing here right now, like we did with Parasite, like we did the Suspiria movies. And that is kind of a holy right to a film audience to watch, to consume, and to interpret the material as we do, as we want to do. And what Other Space ends up doing is that it breaks all the rules of filmmaking. It breaks all the rules of editing. These being the kind of a boundaries that we wanna hold very very strongly because it helps us in our interpretations. Like for example, the golden rules how editing should go. You a person cuts looks into direction left, you cut to the person on the left.
Mm.
Basic editing 101 rules which you are supposed to hold. Most of the cases, if you don't, you are doing essentially bad editing unless it's some really strong artistic sensibility. But Outer Space breaks all the rules. And Outer Space does to it to an extent where it becomes so unclear and so ambiguous that you really can't do anything with the material. Like, you can't really analyze this because you can't make head or tails about it. You can't make any goddamn sense what you are seeing
Yeah,
because you at times you can't even see the actual fucking film thanks to all the editing that goes on.
and I
So
think that is really scary. That's what is scary. Even scarier than the entity in that sense. You can't make sense of anything that's going on.
yeah, and that's how I understand, or I can believe it very much can feel when you are being sexually assaulted. And
Yeah,
just like your rights not to be touched are being broken against when you are facing the assault, the film critics perceived basic right to have your own interpretation of the source material is
mm.
also being touched and broken against by a film that you can't understand.
Yeah, and Henrik, what is rape about essentially? It's about the loss of control. And that's essentially what is happening to the film material, actually. You start to see the perforation, and the film is completely out of control. And it's kind of the bending the reality. You get plunged into this the between universes where reality gets completely scrambled, and you see those perforation edges. So you are not anymore really inside the film. You are in some kind of a betweener world, and you have definitely lost control.
Yeah, you're kind of going through just bunch of images that don't correlate with each other, and like it just it is that film kind of just exists and flashes by your eyes.
Yeah, and it's almost like the feeling that you get is that you would like to really see better what is going on, and you are so kind of concerned throughout the film, like what is going on with this lady, and you would almost like to reach out and help her, but she is living in the reality of that film reel, and the film reel is out of control, and what can I do? And as an audience, you're just left baffled there on your seat. Where am I?
Yeah, yeah, and then when the film finally actually clears a bit, when it focuses on something on the 7 minutes 24-25 second mark, what you actually see clearly is violence done to that lady. Or
Yeah.
the editing bullshit takes a break exactly on the moment when the lady's face is violently being smashed against a mirror.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how this sound in the film is sourced when you hear this, this when you would put on a vinyl, this kind of a scratchy noise that you get in the background, and I think that is really eerie contribution.
And that kind of essentially is the entirety of Tscherkassky's Outer Space. It's 10 minutes of that.
Yeah, it's 10 minutes of
And
that.
yeah, and the emotional reaction you get from the film is quite strong.
I
Like you feel yourself. I felt tired, and
mm,
I felt kind of drained in some weird, unexplainable way.
it's hard to put in the words, for me at least, how you feel after the film. I certainly, well, what kind of a way is it for like a movie enthusiast to watch a film in a metro? I apologize for every film enthusiast for that, but I was really desperate to see a film. And but I what I found fascinating is that I was in the metro with my headphones looking at this and being really impressed and actually scared. I would say that this is one of the scariest films that I have seen in a long time.
Yeah, there is something subliminal
Hmm.
in the film and in the effect that the film has on you.
No, there's a good word for that. Well, what's your favorite performance?
The film really doesn't have a performance. It has exactly one performance who really isn't performing here. Like Barbara Hershey doesn't even know that she's in this film.
This is pretty meta, but I would give this one to the film Perforations. That's a great performance.
That actually isn't bad answer at all. I should have been able to thought that one myself too.
Nobody
God damn
ever
it!
dictated in this podcast that it would be something living and breathing that is doing the best performance.
That is exactly true.
Yeah, I guess this is the kind of film where you can name a favorite shot, and that I would give to the external shots of the house near the end. There's something really eerie about this building when it's in black and white, and I suppose also the film contrast has been altered where it looks even darker.
Yeah, on my end, it would be at 8 minute mark. This is one of the more clearer shots of of Hershey. It's the moment when, like you worded it out, it looks like she's almost stabbing the audience.
Oh yeah, that is memorable, and my favorite quote. Well, there's no dialogue
No,
in this film.
I'm not even gonna try this one.
Yeah, there's a limit to my creativity here. Uh, Three adjectives to describe the film.
Um, on my end, it would be dark, violent, and explosive.
Mm. Surprisingly, I have different adjectives for this one. It's haunting, surreal, and disturbing. Eric, would you recommend Outer Space 1999?
It's uh, it's a tough one. Obviously, I wouldn't recommend this to anyone who might get an epileptic seizure or migraine.
Make no mistake about it.
Avoid all costs. But that's as far as the easy answers go. I kinda would, generally give this overall recommendation, like recommendation to everyone. But that comes with the notion that I am fully aware that most likely only like film buffs who are into avant-garde, who are into surrealism, might actually enjoy this. And even then, enjoy might be the wrong word. It's like the thing is, it's not a bad film in any way, in any sense. Like the film's main goal is to have a strong emotional reaction on its audience, and in my opinion also simulate sexual assault. And I think it passes on both with flying colors. This might be the best simulation I've ever experienced, if you can even make that kind of a statement. It did have a strong emotional reaction on me, most definitely. But at the same time, because it's so goddamn avant-garde on its presentation, it might be so that the casual movie watcher could find it completely unenjoyable. And partly, yes, that is the film's goal. Obviously, sexual assault shouldn't be enjoyable. God damn it, of course. But also enjoyable in the sense that the point might fly by, or the perceived, what I believe is the point of the film might fly past the most casual of movie watchers, and this might be the film where most of those who end up seeing this will make the argument, oh, it was shit, I didn't understand any of it, it didn't have any meaning. That's the most likeliest scenario that I can I can visualize happening when watching and discussing the film. But I still kind of would recommend this one. It's a hell of a ride. Can't make a podcast episode for about it to save your life, but but by God, it's something that I would say, yeah, go and check it out.
Yeah, I loved this one. I loved it. Of course, I'm not a fan of rape in any sense, but in the way that it gets into the subliminal terror of the mind. It's definitely not for everyone. Certainly not as you mentioned for those epileptic people out there. Don't watch it. But like you said, it might get to the point where you might be part of the audience that just doesn't understand this kind of cinema or doesn't understand the point. Why am I watching this? I don't get it. I saw these comments around the internet. I don't get it. And I get it that you don't get it. It's okay. This is more for film buffs, I guess. But but what I have personally learned when doing this laboratory podcast that we're doing, when I have been watching films for a long time, is that you can open so many different avenues on the way that you can enjoy and look at a film. Like, of course, if I would have watched this 20 years ago, I would have probably said that this is a complete shit show. Like, who the fucking idiot put this together anyway? But then you have this painting approach. This you just you have to discard all your usual way of looking at film. There is no story structure. It's just what you feel when you're watching it, and I loved it. I guess it's time to get back to Earth.
I guess so. So what would be the next week's cinematic experience?
Well, well. Um, of course, this is also not funny in any way, but um, I'm just gonna throw it out. I'm just gonna give it a go for the sake of Tom. Would you do Goldfinger?
The Bond film that has some really questionable sexual practices in it, you
Yeah,
mean?
Sean Connery just died, so I thought it would be again at the edge. and following the trends, of course. That's already an old subject when the episode comes out. But okay, it can be Goldfinger. I'm not forcing Goldfinger. We can also look at some other libraries of Sean Connery. No problem with that. But Goldfinger for sure is the film to watch if you're gonna look at like the some of the best work that he has done, and is most remembered for. But still not pushing it.
Sure, why not? In memory of now unfortunately late Sean Connery. Yeah, by all means, let's come from film that deals with sexual assault and check out the film where Sean Connery sexually assaults a lady. So no, next week, Goldfinger, everybody.
Yeah, keeping with the theme of sexual assault in this podcast next week. Eihän toi mikään taideteos ole toi Another Time, Another Place, mutta siinäkin jotakin viehätystä kyllä. The Untouchables, en mä nyt ehkä menisi sinne ainakaan. Liian semmoinen nimileffa. The Rock, no joo.
Herrasmiesliiga.
No hitto, mitä hittoa.
Mitä, Highlander 2?